At 9:14 on a quiet Tuesday morning, Officer Raymond Keller ordered a 61-year-old black woman to put down a wrench in her own garage. 4 minutes later, even after dispatch confirmed that she owned the house, she was still standing in handcuffs beside her late husband's car. 3 days after that, Keller entered a crowded public hearing and discovered that the woman he had treated like a trespasser was the new chair of the commission responsible for reviewing police conduct across the entire city. What happened next would cost him his patrol assignment, expose years of overlooked complaints, and force Cedar Grove to change the way its officers dealt with ordinary citizens. But the story did not begin with a badge, a hearing, or a city policy. It began beneath a midnight blue 1967 Chevrolet Impala. Denise Walker lay on her back under the car, one hand holding a wrench and the other supporting a new fuel line she had waited 11 days to receive from a parts shop in Ohio. The old line rested on the concrete beside her, bent like a question mark. It no longer smelled of gasoline. It carried the sweet metallic odor of something that had grown old in darkness. Samuel used to call it the smell of time being trapped. Denise turned the wrench a quarter turn. The nut refused to move. A familiar ache traveled through her left shoulder, a souvenir from a hard landing in a C-130 at Ramstein in 1998. 4 military doctors had promised to fix it. None had. She rested for 10 seconds, then tried again. A small radio on Samuel's workbench played an old gospel hymn. Outside, the automatic sprinkler on Maple Avenue clicked on at exactly 9:15, as it had for nearly 3 decades. Morning light was beginning to touch the right side of the Impala, bringing out the deep blue shade Samuel had mixed 3 times before naming it Midnight Lake. For a few peaceful seconds, Denise believed the hardest thing she would face that day was a stubborn bolt. Samuel Walker had been gone for 11 months. Cancer had taken his strength gradually, then his voice, then finally his breath. But it had not taken his humor. 2 nights before he died, when Denise had leaned over his hospital bed and asked whether he was afraid, Samuel had looked toward the window and whispered, "Only afraid you will let somebody put the wrong tires on my car." Even then, Denise had laughed. The car was a 1967 Chevrolet Impala, painted a deep blue Samuel called Midnight Lake. He had bought it before their wedding, when he was a 29-year-old aircraft mechanic with more confidence than money. He had driven it to their first date, their wedding, and the hospital on the night their daughter was born. Over the years, the car became more than a machine. It was where Samuel taught their daughter, Alicia, to drive. It carried Denise to the airport before her first overseas assignment. It sat in the driveway every Christmas morning, with a wreath tied to the front grille, because Samuel believed even automobiles deserved holiday spirit. When his illness worsened, Samuel began restoring it one final time. He removed the engine, cleaned every piece, replaced the worn wiring, and ordered new upholstery. But his hands grew weak before he could finish. On his last week at home, Denise sat beside him in the garage while afternoon light rested across the blue hood. "You spent your life fixing everything for everybody," she told him. "You should have asked for help." Samuel smiled. "I did ask." "When?" "The day I married you." He placed his hand over hers. "Finish the car, Dee." She shook her head. "I barely know the difference between a carburetor and a coffee maker." "You know how to learn." That was true. Denise had spent her career learning difficult things. She had entered the Air Force at 23, when few people expected a black woman from a working-class neighborhood in Dayton to rise very far. She began as a logistics officer, earned a graduate degree in systems management at night, and eventually became one of the most respected operational planners in her command. She coordinated emergency responses after hurricanes. She oversaw supply operations across 3 continents. She commanded men and women who came from every part of the country and every kind of family. By the time she retired as a colonel, Denise had learned that leadership was rarely about giving the loudest order. Leadership was about seeing clearly when others were frightened. It was about asking questions before drawing conclusions. It was about understanding that every uniform carried power, and every person wearing one was responsible for how that power touched the lives of others. Samuel knew she could finish the car. Not because she was a mechanic, but because she refused to let fear become an excuse. So, 11 months after his death, Denise began. She watched repair videos. She read manuals. She called two of Samuel's oldest friends and asked questions. She labeled every wire. She kept each bolt in a small plastic cup, with the name of the part written in black marker. Some mornings the work went smoothly. Other mornings she spent an hour looking for a tool that had been in her pocket the whole time. But she continued. That Tuesday, she planned to install a repaired fuel line before meeting her daughter for lunch. She raised the garage door and let the cool spring air inside. She wore faded jeans, work boots, and one of Samuel's old gray shirts. The shirt was too large in the shoulders and carried a dark stain near the pocket that no amount of washing had ever removed. Denise tied a patterned scarf over her hair, set the coffee on Samuel's workbench, and turned on the small radio near the window. A gospel singer filled the garage with a low, gentle voice. For the first time in weeks, Denise felt peaceful. She did not notice the patrol car turn onto Maple Avenue. Officer Raymond Keller had been with the Cedar Grove Police Department for 17 years. He was 43, broad-shouldered, and known among younger officers as a man who made decisions quickly. Some called him confident, others called him impatient. His personnel file described him as experienced, productive, and occasionally resistant to supervisory feedback. That morning, Keller was driving with Officer Laura Bennett, a 28-year-old patrol officer, in her second year on the force. They had been sent to investigate a report of a suspicious vehicle 3 streets away. The vehicle was gone by the time they arrived. Dispatch had advised them to patrol the surrounding blocks before returning to service. As Keller drove down Maple Avenue, he saw Denise inside the open garage. She was leaning over the side of the Impala with a silver wrench in her right hand. Keller slowed the patrol car. Bennett glanced toward him. "What is it?" Keller nodded toward the garage. "Open door. Woman working on a classic car." Bennett looked through the passenger window. "Looks like she lives there." "Maybe." There had been 2 garage burglaries in the district during the previous month. Neither had occurred on Maple Avenue. Neither suspect had been described as a woman in her 60s. Still, Keller pulled to the curb. He did not activate the siren or emergency lights. Denise heard the car door close but assumed it belonged to a neighbor. She was tightening a connection when Keller appeared at the edge of the driveway. "Ma'am." Denise looked up. The officer stood several yards away, one hand resting near his belt. Bennett remained slightly behind him. "Good morning," Denise said. "What are you doing?" Denise glanced at the car, and then back at him. "Trying to make sure this fuel line does not leak." Keller did not smile. "Do you live here?" "Yes." "Can you prove that?" Denise straightened slowly. Years of command experience taught her to notice small details. Keller had not introduced himself. He had not explained why he was there. His body camera was pointed toward her, but no small light appeared on the front. Denise placed the wrench on the workbench. "My identification is inside the house," she said. "Before I retrieve it, may I ask why you are questioning me?" "We are investigating suspicious activity in the area." "What suspicious activity?" "A possible burglary." "Was a burglary reported at this address?" Keller's expression tightened. "I am asking the questions right now." Denise looked at the nameplate above his badge. "Keller." She repeated it silently so she would remember. "I understand that you are conducting an investigation, Officer Keller," she said. "I am cooperating. I am also asking why you believe I may not belong in my own garage." Bennett shifted slightly. Keller stepped onto the driveway. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Denise's hands were already visible. "They are where you can see them. Do not argue with me." "I am not arguing. You were holding a metal object when we arrived." "A wrench." "Step away from the workbench." Denise took one step backward. The radio continued playing behind her. Across the street, curtains moved in the front window of Mrs. Holloway's home. Mrs. Holloway was 74 and missed very little that happened on Maple Avenue. Denise remained calm. She had stood inside command centers during emergencies when every telephone rang at once, and lives depended on decisions made within seconds. She knew the difference between danger and discomfort. This was not yet danger, but it was becoming something more serious than a routine question. I will retrieve my identification, Denise said. It is on the kitchen counter. No. Keller moved closer. Stay where you are. How would you like me to prove that I live here if you will not allow me to retrieve my identification? I will determine that. Denise glanced toward Bennett. Officer, your partner has not explained the basis for detaining me. Would you please clarify whether I am free to go inside my home? Bennett opened her mouth. Keller answered first. You are not free to go anywhere until we confirm who you are. Denise felt something cold settle beneath her ribs. Not fear exactly. Recognition. She had experienced versions of this moment before. As a young officer, she had been mistaken for a secretary at meetings she had organized. As a major, she had been asked to carry coffee while standing beside junior officers who were assumed to outrank her. Once, while wearing civilian clothes at a military conference, a contractor had tried to remove her from a restricted room until a general walked over and greeted her by name. Each time, Denise had learned to remain composed. But composure did not erase the insult. It only prevented the insult from controlling her. My name is Denise Walker, she said. This is my home. The vehicle belongs to my family. You may verify the property records or speak with any neighbor on this street. Keller looked toward the garage. Tools covered the workbench. Boxes of parts sat near the wall. A framed photograph of Denise and Samuel hung beside an old Air Force flag. Yet Keller's attention remained fixed on her. Turn around. Denise did not move. For what purpose? Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Bennett looked at Keller. Ray, maybe we can just run her name. I said turn around. Denise's eyes moved from Keller to Bennett, then back again. Officer Keller, I have not threatened you. I have complied with your instructions. I have told you my name and offered several ways to confirm that I live here. Are you placing me under arrest? You are being detained. On what reasonable basis? Keller reached for her arm. Denise stepped back instinctively. It was a small movement. Keller treated it like defiance. He caught her wrist, turned her gently but firmly toward the side of the car, and pulled one arm behind her back. Bennett moved forward. Ma'am, please do not resist. I am not resisting, Denise said. My left shoulder was injured during military service. Do not raise my arm higher. Keller paused for only a fraction of a second. Then stopped pulling away. I am standing still. The metal cuffs closed around Denise's wrists. Their sound was quieter than she expected. A simple click. A small mechanical noise. Yet to Denise, it seemed to travel through the entire garage. The radio singer reached the final line of a hymn about mercy. Keller guided Denise away from the car. At that moment, Mrs. Holloway came hurrying across the street in house slippers and a long green robe. What are you doing? She called. Keller raised one hand. Ma'am, stay back. That is Colonel Walker. Denise closed her eyes briefly. She did not want Mrs. Holloway to become involved. The older woman had high blood pressure and a habit of becoming fearless when angry. Please stay on the sidewalk, Clara, Denise said. Mrs. Holloway ignored her. She has lived in that house since before you were old enough to wear that badge. Keller looked at Denise. Colonel? Retired, Denise said. Air Force, Mrs. Holloway added. More than 30 years. Her husband built half the porches on this street. You have no business putting handcuffs on her. Bennett looked toward the framed photograph inside the garage. It showed Denise in dress uniform beside Samuel. Silver eagles rested on her shoulders. Keller's jaw moved slightly. Retired military status does not exempt anyone from an investigation. No one said it did, Denise replied. But evidence should guide an investigation, not assumptions. Keller called Denise's name into dispatch. While they waited, a delivery truck slowed at the end of the street. Two neighbors stepped onto their porches. A teenager lifted a phone but lowered it when Denise looked toward him. She did not want the moment turned into entertainment. She wanted it documented. There was a difference. Officer Bennett, Denise said quietly, is your body camera active? Bennett looked down. A light blinked on the front of her camera. Yes, ma'am. Denise turned her head slightly toward Keller. Is yours? Keller did not answer. Bennett glanced at him. Ray? Keller touched the camera mounted to his vest. A light came on. I activated it when the detention began, he said. Denise remembered exactly when he had touched it. It had been after Mrs. Holloway arrived. Dispatch responded through the radio. Denise Walker was listed as the owner of the property. Her driver's license matched the address. No warrants. No criminal history. Keller listened without expression. Bennett stepped closer. Her information checks out. Denise expected the cuffs to open. They did not. Keller looked toward the workbench. We still need to determine whether the vehicle is stolen. Denise turned as far as the cuffs allowed. The registration is in the glove compartment. Who is Samuel Walker? My husband. Where is he? Denise looked directly at him. He died last year. Something passed across Bennett's face. Keller's expression remained fixed. I am sorry for your loss, he said, but his voice carried no warmth. He walked toward the car. Denise spoke more firmly. You do not have permission to search the vehicle. Keller stopped. The garage door is open, and the vehicle is visible. Visibility is not consent. I am checking the registration. You may request it. You may not enter the car without consent or legal cause. Keller turned around. Ma'am, you need to stop telling me how to do my job. Denise's voice remained steady. I am telling you the limits of my consent. For several seconds, no one spoke. A breeze moved through the garage and lifted the corner of a repair manual on the workbench. Bennett stepped toward Keller and lowered her voice. Dispatch confirmed she owns the house. We do not have a stolen vehicle report matching this car. Keller looked at his partner. Then he removed the handcuffs. The marks around Denise's wrists were pale at first, then slowly darkened. She brought her hands forward but did not rub them. Keller said, The situation could have been resolved faster if you had followed instructions without challenging every question. Mrs. Holloway made a sound of disbelief. Denise looked down at her wrists, then back at Keller. I followed your instructions. I also exercised my right to ask why I was being detained. You stepped away when I reached for you. I stepped back because you moved toward me without explaining what you intended to do. Keller took out a small notebook. I will document the contact. Denise studied him. Please document all of it. I intend to. Include the time you arrived. Include when you activated your camera. Include that dispatch confirmed my identity. Include that your partner suggested verifying my name before you placed me in handcuffs. Bennett looked at the ground. Keller's face reddened. Are you threatening to file a complaint? No, Denise said. I am informing you that accuracy matters. He put the notebook away. You are free to continue your morning. Denise looked toward the wrench on the bench. The sentence was so ordinary that it felt almost cruel. 5 minutes earlier, she had been a homeowner working on her husband's car. Now she stood in the same garage, surrounded by the same tools, while her wrists ached, and half the street watched from their porches. Nothing had been taken from the garage, yet something had been disturbed. A sense of safety, a sense of privacy, the quiet belief that her own driveway belonged to her. Officer Keller returned to the patrol car. Bennett hesitated. She looked at Denise, then at the framed Air Force photograph. I am sorry about your husband, she said. Denise did not answer immediately. Bennett seemed to be waiting for forgiveness. Denise was not ready to give it. Finally, she said, You saw what was happening. Bennett swallowed. Yes, ma'am. You knew there was another way to handle it. Yes. Remember that next time. Bennett lowered her eyes. Then she walked back to the patrol car. Denise watched the vehicle disappear around the corner. Mrs. Holloway came into the garage and touched Denise's elbow. Are you all right? Denise wanted to say yes. For most of her life, she had been the person who said yes because others needed her to be steady. Yes, I am fine. Yes, I can handle it. Yes, go home to your family. I will remain here and solve the problem. But Samuel was gone, and the garage was suddenly too quiet. No, she said. The word surprised both of them. Mrs. Holloway took Denise into her arms. For a moment, Denise allowed herself to lean against someone else. She smelled Clara Holloway's lavender hand cream. She heard birds in the oak tree. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower started. Life continued with unreasonable normality. When Mrs. Holloway returned home, Denise lowered the garage door. She did not finish the fuel line. Instead, she sat in Samuel's old wooden chair near the workbench and looked at the car. On the wall above the tools hung a small sign Samuel had made from a scrap of oak. Measure twice, cut once. He had lived by those words. Think before acting. Check before deciding. Understand before judging. Denise looked at the marks on her wrists. Then she looked toward the black dome of the security camera mounted above the side door. Samuel had installed the system after a series of package thefts in the neighborhood. He had chosen a model that recorded sound and uploaded every file to a secure cloud account. He used to complain that the monthly fee was too high. Denise had almost canceled it after his death. Now she stood, walked into the house, opened her laptop, and signed in. The entire encounter was there. The patrol car arriving, Keller stepping onto the property, her placing the wrench down before he ordered her to do so. Her hands visible, her calm questions, Bennett's suggestion to verify her identity, Keller's camera remaining off, the moment he touched Denise's arm, the sound of the handcuffs, every word, every pause, every decision. Denise watched the recording once. Then she stopped. She had spent too many years reviewing operational failures to mistake emotion for evidence. She knew anger could sharpen attention, but it could also narrow vision. So she did what she had taught countless young officers to do during difficult missions. She created a timeline. She wrote down the arrival time. She listed every instruction and response. She marked the moment Keller entered the driveway and the moment he crossed into the garage. She noted the exact time dispatch confirmed her identity. She saved 3 copies of the video. Then she called her daughter. Alicia Walker was 36 and worked as a physical therapist at Cedar Grove Veterans Medical Center. She inherited Samuel's kindness and Denise's inability to ignore injustice. When Denise told her what happened, Alicia became silent. Then she said, "I am coming over. You are at work. I am leaving. No. Mom, I am safe. You were put in handcuffs in your own garage, and now I am safe. That does not make it acceptable." Denise looked toward Samuel's coffee pot. "No," she said, "it does not." Alicia lowered her voice. "Did they know who you are?" Denise knew what her daughter meant. Not just a retired colonel. Not just a retired colonel. 2 months earlier, the mayor had appointed Denise chair of the newly reorganized Cedar Grove Public Safety Accountability Commission. The commission was independent from the police department and responsible for reviewing serious complaints, examining department policies, and recommending disciplinary or structural changes. Denise had accepted the appointment reluctantly. After Samuel died, she had planned a quieter life. She wanted to finish the car, volunteer at the Veterans Center, and perhaps travel to places she had once seen only through the window of a military transport plane. But the mayor had asked her to serve because the commission was losing public trust. 3 previous members had resigned after years of political disagreement. Community organizations believed the commission protected the department. Police officers believed it judged them without understanding their work. Denise agreed to serve only after receiving a promise that the commission would have access to complete records and authority to recommend meaningful reform. Her first public hearing as chair was scheduled for Friday. Officer Keller could not have known that. Her appointment had been announced, but Denise was not a public celebrity. The city website included her photograph, though she wore a formal suit and short silver hair, not Samuel's oversized work shirt and a scarf. "No," Denise told Alicia. "They did not know." "What are you going to do?" Denise looked at the video timeline on her laptop. "I am going to follow the process." Alicia exhaled. "The process you are now in charge of? That is exactly why I need to be careful." By noon, Denise had contacted the commission's ethics counsel, Margaret Shaw. Margaret was a former judge with a soft voice and the ability to make simple questions feel like courtroom testimony. She listened without interruption. When Denise finished, Margaret said, You understand that you cannot participate in any review of your own complaint. Of course, you will need to disclose the incident publicly if the complaint reaches the commission. I intend to. It may be used against you. Denise leaned back in her chair. How? Some people will say you are using your position to punish an officer. Others will say you were appointed because you planned to attack the department. Still others will decide the story before seeing any evidence. That would happen regardless of what I do. Yes. Then I will do what is right. Margaret was silent for a moment. Do you want to file a formal complaint? Denise looked toward the garage. Samuel had once told her that a complaint was not an act of anger if its purpose was to prevent the same harm from reaching someone else. Yes, she said, but I want it reviewed by an outside investigator. That can be arranged. And I will recuse myself from every discussion, recommendation, and vote related to the incident. I expected nothing less. Denise spent the afternoon completing the complaint. She did not describe Keller as hateful. She did not claim to know his thoughts. She described his actions. He entered private property without establishing that a crime had occurred at that address. He failed to explain the reason for the detention. He ordered her into handcuffs after she offered identification and verification. He delayed activating his body camera. He continued the detention after dispatch confirmed she owned the home. He attempted to inspect the vehicle after being denied consent. He suggested her questions caused the situation to continue. At the end of the complaint, Denise wrote one additional paragraph. The concern presented here is larger than my personal discomfort. An officer who begins with an unsupported assumption may interpret ordinary questions as resistance and lawful boundaries as hostility. Such decisions can turn a routine encounter into an unnecessary confrontation. A system committed to public safety must examine not only the final outcome, but the chain of judgments that created the risk. She reread the paragraph twice. Then she submitted the complaint. By 7 that evening, a 43-second phone video had been viewed more than 40,000 times. It had been recorded by 16-year-old Devin Reyes, who lived 4 houses down. The clip began as Keller closed the handcuffs and ended when Mrs. Holloway crossed the street. It did not show Denise placing the wrench on the bench. It did not include her offer to retrieve identification or Bennett's suggestion that they verify her name. Devin had titled it, "They handcuffed my grandmother in her own garage." Denise was not his grandmother. Later, the boy would say he had not known how else to describe what the moment felt like. The next morning, Denise walked to his house. Devin opened the door looking prepared to be scolded. "You recorded yesterday," she said. "Yes, ma'am. I am sorry if—" "You do not need to apologize. You were standing on a public sidewalk and documenting something that mattered." He looked relieved, but only slightly. "I have the entire encounter," Denise continued. "Your video begins after the most important decisions were already made. People may argue about whether I looked angry. They should also know there is a complete record." "Do you want me to delete mine?" "No. It belongs to you. I only ask that when people question you, you tell them there is more." Denise handed him an email address. She had spent her career controlling information during emergencies. That morning, she learned that truth did not always need to be controlled in order to be protected. At the police station, Officer Keller began writing his report. He described the encounter as a suspicious person investigation, connected to recent property crimes. He wrote that Denise had been observed holding a metal tool near a valuable vehicle. He stated that she became argumentative when asked to identify herself and repeatedly questioned lawful commands. He wrote that she moved backward and raised her arm while still holding the tool. Then he stopped. The tool had been on the workbench by that point. He remembered that clearly. He also remembered Bennett's body camera. Keller deleted the sentence and wrote a different one. The subject stepped away during the officer's attempt to maintain a safe investigative position. It sounded more professional, less specific, easier to defend. Bennett sat at the desk beside him, writing her own report. Keller glanced toward her screen. "You should make sure our reports are consistent." Bennett looked up. "They should be accurate." "That is what I mean." She turned back to her screen. Keller lowered his voice. "She challenged every instruction. People who cooperate do not make situations difficult. Bennett's fingers stopped moving. She put the wrench down before we reached the garage. Keller looked at her. We did not know who she was. We could have checked. We did check. After she was handcuffed. Keller pushed his chair back. Laura, you have been on patrol less than 2 years. There are things you do not understand yet. Bennett met his eyes. I understand what happened. For a moment, neither officer spoke. Keller looked around the report room. 2 other officers sat several desks away. One was wearing headphones. The other was speaking on the phone. He leaned toward Bennett. Do not turn a routine detention into something it was not. Bennett's face changed. The uncertainty disappeared. What do you think it was? Keller did not answer. He returned to his report. That evening, his supervisor asked why his body camera had not been activated at the beginning of the encounter. Keller said he believed he had activated it when he exited the patrol car, but the device must not have responded. The supervisor reminded him that the new system created an audio buffer when the patrol car door opened. Even if the camera was activated late, the department's server might contain earlier sound. Keller nodded as though the information did not matter. But that night, he slept poorly. He told himself Denise Walker had been difficult. He told himself open garages were vulnerable. He told himself officers were criticized whether they acted or did nothing. He told himself that anyone could have been inside that garage. Yet beneath those explanations lay a smaller, quieter truth. He had seen her and decided what she was before asking who she was. Thursday evening, Denise returned to the garage. Samuel's gray shirt hung over the cracked wooden chair, and the wrench remained where she had placed it before Keller entered the driveway. Alicia found her sitting behind the wheel of the Impala. When Dad was sick, I thought you were never afraid, her daughter said. I was afraid every day. You never looked afraid. People mistake strength for the absence of pain, Denise said. Sometimes we help them make that mistake. You were hurt. Denise lowered her eyes. I was humiliated. I stood in the garage your father built, wearing his shirt, keeping the promise I made to him. For several minutes, I was whatever that officer had decided I was. The worst part was not the handcuffs. It was how quickly his morning became normal again. He drove away. He wrote a report. I stayed here wondering whether I had done something wrong by asking a question in my own home. You did nothing wrong. I know that here. Denise touched her temple, then her heart. Knowing it here is different from feeling it here. Alicia took her hand. They sat without speeches or solutions, allowing the truth to remain between them. Friday morning arrived clear and bright. The first public hearing of the reorganized Public Safety Accountability Commission began at 10 o'clock inside Cedar Grove Municipal Hall. The hearing room had high windows, pale stone walls, and rows of wooden seats. Local reporters gathered near the back. Police representatives sat on the left. Community leaders sat on the right. Residents filled nearly every remaining chair. The commission's purpose that morning was to discuss a proposed body camera policy and a backlog of unresolved citizen complaints. Denise arrived wearing a navy suit, a white blouse, and a small silver pin shaped like Air Force wings. Her hair was uncovered. The marks on her wrists had faded, but a slight tenderness remained. She entered through a side door and took her seat at the center of the raised commission table. Margaret Shaw sat 2 chairs away. Before the hearing began, Margaret leaned toward her. You are certain? Denise opened her folder. Yes. Once you disclose the incident, the room may stop listening to everything else. Then we will help them listen. At 9:58, Officer Keller entered with several members of the police union. He had been told to attend because the commission was discussing body camera compliance. He did not know Denise would preside over the hearing. He walked down the aisle, speaking quietly to another officer. Then he looked toward the commission table. His steps stopped. Denise saw recognition move across his face. First confusion, then disbelief, then the memory of the garage. The union representative beside him followed his gaze. Ray? Keller did not answer. He sat in the second row. Officer Bennett entered a minute later and chose a seat near the aisle, several feet away from him. At 10 o'clock, Denise turned on her microphone. Good morning. Her voice carried evenly through the room. My name is Denise Walker, and I have the honor of serving as chair of the Cedar Grove Public Safety Accountability Commission. Keller looked down. Denise continued. This commission was created because public safety depends on trust, and trust depends on truth. Our purpose is not to weaken law enforcement. Our purpose is to help ensure that authority is exercised lawfully, consistently, and with respect for the people it exists to serve. Several commissioners nodded. Denise opened the agenda. Before we begin, I must make a disclosure. The room grew quiet. On Tuesday morning, I was detained and temporarily handcuffed by members of the Cedar Grove Police Department while working in the garage of my home. A murmur moved through the audience. Denise raised one hand. The incident is under independent investigation. Because I am the complainant, I will not participate in any review, discussion, recommendation, or vote related to that matter. I have asked the vice chair to oversee all commission responsibilities connected to the case. She turned slightly toward Vice Chair Thomas Reed, who nodded. I am disclosing this not to influence the process, but to protect it. Keller sat motionless. A reporter raised a hand, but Denise continued before questions could begin. This experience does not make me uniquely qualified to judge anyone. It makes recusal necessary. Fairness cannot depend on whether the person affected holds an important title. The rights of a commission chair are not greater than the rights of a mechanic, a nurse, a teacher, a cashier, a retired veteran, or a young person walking home from school. The room became completely still. If an encounter is improper only after an officer learns who someone is, then the problem began long before the name was known. Officer Bennett looked toward Denise. Keller closed his eyes. Denise moved to the first agenda item. For the next 2 hours, she led the hearing without mentioning the incident again. The commission reviewed body camera activation rules. Current policy required officers to begin recording at the start of any law enforcement contact, but enforcement was inconsistent. Supervisors often reviewed footage only after complaints were filed. Denise asked practical questions. Could patrol car doors automatically trigger body cameras? Could supervisors receive alerts when footage began late? Could officers document technical failures before the end of a shift? Could civilians request access to footage without waiting months? Police Chief Daniel Price answered each question carefully. When asked whether the department had a culture problem, he did not become defensive. We have good officers, he said. We also have habits that have gone unexamined because no single incident seems serious enough to force change. Denise looked at him. Small failures repeated over time become systems. Yes, ma'am. Then systems must be corrected before a larger failure occurs. In the audience, Keller shifted in his seat. He understood she was not speaking only about him. That made the words harder to dismiss. The meeting might have ended as a careful discussion of cameras and procedure if a woman named Tanya Boyd had not walked to the public microphone. Tanya was about 30, still wearing the beige uniform of a neighborhood pharmacy. Her employee badge swung from one hand. My name is Tanya Boyd, she said. I will be brief because my shift starts at 1. She looked toward Denise. My younger brother was detained at a bus stop on Grand Avenue last November. He was 22. He was wearing a hoodie and waiting for the number 14 bus. Officers kept him there for 40 minutes. We filed a complaint. 18 months later, nobody has called us. Pages stopped turning across the room. I am glad your case is being investigated, Madam Chair. I mean that. But I have listened to you say that your rights are no greater than a cashier's rights. Tanya's fingers tightened around the badge. You had a security camera that saved everything. You had an ethics lawyer who answered the phone that day. You had 32 years of experience understanding how systems work. And you have a seat at that table. My brother had a hoodie and a plastic bench at a bus stop. The room became completely still. Your case will probably be resolved in weeks. His is still waiting. So I am not asking whether you are fair. I am asking what anything discussed here will do for a person who cannot afford to purchase his own evidence. Denise did not reach for a polished answer. Ms. Boyd, she said, I do not have a complete answer for you this morning. A murmur traveled through the audience. I can promise that your brother's complaint will be located before the end of this week. But that would solve one file. You are asking about the system. Denise set down her pen. And you are right. I built a precise record because I had the tools to do it. Precision mattered, but it is not enough. You need a system in which evidence does not depend on whether an ordinary person can afford a camera, retain a lawyer, or understand a complaint process designed by professionals. She closed the printed agenda. We will revise the proposal before asking anyone to approve it. Tanya nodded once. It was not gratitude. It was recognition that she had been heard. After the hearing, reporters gathered near the exits. Denise declined to discuss the investigation. The evidence should speak through the proper process, she said. A reporter asked whether Officer Keller should be dismissed. Denise looked directly into the camera. No person should be disciplined because a headline demands it. No person should be protected because a uniform excuses it. The facts should be reviewed completely, and the response should match what those facts establish. The statement appeared on evening news broadcasts across the city. Some viewers praised her restraint. Some accused her of protecting the department. Others accused her of seeking attention. Denise read none of the comments. She went home, changed into Samuel's gray shirt, and returned to the garage. For the first time since Tuesday, she picked up the wrench and finished tightening the fuel line. The independent investigation lasted 4 weeks. Amelia Grant, a retired federal investigator, reviewed the garage recording, Officer Bennett's body camera, the patrol car's buffered audio, dispatch records, 6 years of complaints, and dozens of Keller's previous stops. No earlier incident was identical to what happened in Denise's garage. Taken together, however, the records formed a pattern. Keller was more likely to begin with commands instead of explanations when speaking to black residents. He was more likely to describe ordinary questions as hostility. He had activated his body camera late in 11 documented encounters. Supervisors had treated each concern as a separate inconvenience, a reminder about courtesy, a conversation about communication, a note about camera policy. No one had placed the pieces beside one another. Bennett admitted that she had known the encounter was escalating without cause. She also admitted that her first report used vague language because Keller had told her their accounts needed to be consistent. Consistency is not the same as truth, Grant told her. Bennett submitted a corrected statement. Her honesty did not erase her failure to intervene, but it prevented the failure from becoming a lie she would have to carry for the rest of her career. Keller's interview was harder. He said Denise had been holding a possible weapon. Grant showed him the timestamp proving the wrench had been on the workbench before his first question. He said he had lacked information. Grant reminded him that Denise had offered identification, Bennett had suggested checking her name, and dispatch had confirmed her address. Finally, Keller said, "I did not know she was the commission chair." Grant looked at him. Why should that matter? He understood his mistake the moment the words left him. The final report concluded that Keller had no lawful reason to continue the detention after Denise's identity was confirmed. It found that his written report was misleading, that he had violated camera policy, and that he had escalated an encounter created largely by his own assumptions. The report also criticized the department. Keller had made the decisions, but the institution had seen warning signs and chosen not to connect them. Keller was suspended without pay, permanently removed from patrol duty, and transferred to the department's vehicle maintenance unit after completing mandatory training on constitutional policing, report integrity, de-escalation, and bias recognition. Bennett received a shorter suspension, 6 months of enhanced supervision, and required intervention training. Some community groups believed Keller should have been dismissed. Some police representatives believed the discipline was too severe. Denise understood both reactions. Accountability often disappointed people who wanted one dramatic ending. Real reform was slower. It lived in deadlines, records, supervision, and rules that remained after the cameras left. At the next commission meeting, Denise introduced the Clear Contact Initiative. Officers would be required to state the reason for a stop as soon as safety allowed. Patrol car doors would automatically activate body cameras. Repeated low-level complaints would be reviewed together for patterns. Officers would have a duty to intervene when a colleague escalated an encounter without legal cause. Every complaint would receive a written response within 30 days and a final decision within 120 days. Residents could request body camera footage connected to their own encounters without paying a fee. Denise added one sentence to the written proposal. A system in which justice depends on whether a citizen can afford a camera is not a system, it is a lottery. The initiative passed at the beginning of summer. 7 weeks later, Tanya Boyd received a 4-page decision concerning her brother's complaint. It did not agree with every claim the family had made, but it answered each one, and it arrived after 43 days instead of 18 months. Bennett eventually returned to patrol. One afternoon, she and a new partner responded to a report of a black man entering the rear door of a closed pharmacy with a toolbox. Bennett approached him carefully. "Good afternoon. I am Officer Bennett. Someone reported activity at this door. Can you tell me what is happening?" The man pointed to the refrigeration company logo on his shirt. The owner was waiting inside. A phone call confirmed it in less than 2 minutes. As Bennett walked back to the patrol car, her partner said, "That was easy." Bennett looked toward the repairman. It should have been. Keller had a more difficult road. At first, he treated the maintenance assignment as humiliation. He blamed Denise, Bennett, the city, and the public. At home, he repeated that Denise had made the encounter harder than it needed to be. His wife, Monica, watched the entire garage video. "You were not afraid of her," she told him one evening at the kitchen table. "You were annoyed by her. She challenged every instruction. She asked why you were in her garage. You do not understand what the street is like." "Maybe not, but I understand what that garage looked like." Keller turned away. Monica touched the investigation report. "You keep saying you did not know who she was." "I did not. That is the problem." He looked at her. "You think your mistake was failing to recognize an important woman. Your mistake was deciding she was unimportant." Monica went upstairs, leaving Keller alone with the unopened report. During his 4th training session, the instructor played the garage video without sound. Keller could no longer hide inside Denise's words, or claim that her questions had provoked him. He saw her standing still with open hands. He saw his own shoulders rise, his finger point, Bennett shift uneasily, and Mrs. Holloway cross the street in house slippers. The instructor paused the image as the handcuffs closed. "What do you see?" Keller stared at the screen. "I see a man who needed to be right," he said at last. The instructor waited. "And I see a woman who understood the situation better than he did." It was the first honest thing he had said about that morning. Near the end of the year, Keller requested a private restorative meeting with Denise. She refused at first. She did not need his apology to prove what had happened, and she did not want to become responsible for his redemption. Eventually, she agreed on 3 conditions: no cameras, no press, and no expectation of forgiveness. They sat across from each other at a worn round table in a community center. Keller wore a plain blue shirt. Without the uniform, he looked older and smaller. "Colonel Walker," he began, "I treated you as suspicious before I had evidence that anything was wrong. When you asked reasonable questions, I treated them as challenges. When the facts showed I was mistaken, I searched for new reasons to continue instead of admitting it." Denise watched him. "I kept saying I did not know who you were," he continued. "I understand now that I should not have needed to know." "What was the truth?" Denise asked. "The truth was that I saw you in that garage and made assumptions about whether you belonged there. After that, I interpreted everything you did through those assumptions." "And race?" Keller took a slow breath. "Yes." The word was quiet, but it did not hide. "I did not use hateful language. For a long time, I used that as proof that race had nothing to do with my decisions, but the records showed that I treated you differently from white homeowners in similar situations. My partner saw it. The video showed it." Denise folded her hands. "What do you believe the handcuffs did to me?" "They embarrassed you." "Yes." "They made you feel unsafe in your own home." "Yes." He paused. "They turned your husband's garage into a place where you were treated as though you did not belong." Denise's eyes brightened, but she did not look away. "I am sorry," Keller said. "I do not believe you woke up that morning planning to hurt me," Denise replied. "But people are often hurt by decisions that were never planned. Intent matters. Impact also matters. I understand." "No, You are beginning to understand. He accepted the correction. I wore a uniform for 32 years, Denise continued. I know what it does to a room. People watch your hands. They listen to your voice. They decide whether it is safe to speak. The uniform may belong to an institution, but its power moves through the person wearing it. You use that power carelessly. Yes. I do not know whether I forgive you today. Keller nodded. But accountability should leave room for change when change is honest. This is not about what you deserve. It is about what you do next. When the meeting ended, Keller stopped near the door. Did you finish the car? For the first time that afternoon, Denise smiled. Almost. The following spring, on a quiet Saturday, Denise tightened the final bolt. No crowd stood in the garage. Alicia was at work. Samuel's friends had family obligations. The last coolant hose had taken 40 minutes longer than expected, and the completion of a promise arrived without ceremony. Denise stepped back and looked at the Impala. It was not exactly the car Samuel would have built. The stitching near the driver's door was slightly uneven. The radio still lost reception beside the river. A small piece of chrome had been installed backward, and Denise had decided to leave it that way, because it felt like her signature. She sat behind the wheel and turned the key. The engine caught on the second try. It rumbled, hesitated, then settled into the deep, steady rhythm she had heard from the passenger seat for 28 years, and was now hearing from the driver's side. Denise did not speak to Samuel. Months earlier, she had stopped needing to say the words aloud. She backed out of the garage. Mrs. Holloway rose from her porch and lifted both arms toward the sky. Denise tapped the horn twice and turned toward the river road with the windows open. For months after Samuel died, she had imagined grief as a room she needed to escape. Now she understood that grief was not a locked room. It was a road traveled beside someone who could no longer be seen. Their absence sat in the empty seat. Their memory guided your hands. Their love remained in every turn you were brave enough to make. Behind Denise was a garage where she had once been treated like a stranger. Ahead was a city still learning to see its people clearly. The work was unfinished. It would always be unfinished. But Denise Walker had never been afraid of work. She pressed gently on the accelerator. The midnight blue Impala moved forward beneath the open sky, carrying an old promise, a hard-won truth, and the quiet dignity of a woman who knew that authority could challenge her place in the world, but it could never define it.